In this episode, we're going to turn the idea of studying for Linux Plus into a practical game plan that fits real life, especially if you have a job, a family, and a calendar that does not care about your certification goals. Most people do not struggle because they are incapable of learning Linux, but because they try to study in a way that fights how memory actually works. When you cram, skim, and bounce between topics with no structure, your brain stores fragments instead of usable skills, and the exam exposes that quickly. The goal is to build a routine that steadily converts unfamiliar concepts into confident recall, while also building the hands-on intuition Linux questions often require. You will not need complicated tools or marathon sessions, but you will need consistency, simple feedback loops, and a clear definition of what progress looks like each week. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyber.author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A strong study plan begins with an honest inventory of constraints, because unrealistic plans fail even when motivation is high. If you can only study 4 days a week, pretending you will study 7 days a week just guarantees guilt and drift. Instead, think in terms of repeatable sessions, where each session has a clear purpose and a predictable finish line, so you can start without negotiating with yourself every time. The most effective learners treat study time like a series of short deposits into a skill account rather than a single large withdrawal right before test day. This also helps your brain, because spaced repetition strengthens memory by revisiting material after it starts to fade. When your plan respects your real schedule, you stop relying on last-minute heroics, and you start relying on a rhythm that builds confidence quietly. That rhythm will carry you through topics that feel dry at first, because the plan does not require constant excitement to function. The next step is to understand what kind of exam Linux Plus is really testing, because that shapes how you should study. The exam is not asking you to become a full-time Linux administrator overnight, but it does expect you to recognize common concepts, reason through scenarios, and choose the best next action when there are multiple plausible options. That means you need both conceptual understanding and practical familiarity, even if the questions are not asking you to type commands during the test. A beginner mistake is treating the exam as a vocabulary quiz, where memorizing definitions feels like progress, but then the question describes a real situation and the memorized words do not connect to decisions. The better approach is to learn each concept in 3 layers: what it is, why it matters operationally, and how it would show up as a problem or a choice. When those layers are connected, recall becomes faster and more reliable. To make those layers stick, you need a study loop that includes input, processing, and retrieval, because passive reading is not enough to build exam-ready memory. Input is where you first encounter a concept, like file permissions or processes, and you make sure you understand the basic meaning. Processing is where you re-explain it in your own words and connect it to a mental picture, such as imagining who can do what to a file and what happens if the wrong person can change it. Retrieval is where you force your brain to produce the idea without looking, because that is the same mental action the exam demands. If you skip retrieval, you create the illusion of knowledge, where things look familiar on the page but disappear when you need them. Retrieval does not have to be dramatic, and it can be as simple as asking yourself a question and answering out loud before you check your notes. When you repeat this loop across weeks, you are not just covering content, you are building durable access to the content. A practical way to organize your weeks is to alternate between building new knowledge and reinforcing what you already touched, because confidence grows faster when you can feel mastery increasing. Early in your study journey, you will spend more time building foundations, but you should still schedule regular returns to earlier topics so they do not fade. This is where many learners go wrong by treating studying like a one-way march through a book, finishing chapters, and never returning until they panic. Instead, think of learning as layering, where each pass adds clarity, speed, and accuracy. When you revisit a concept, your goal is not to reread everything, but to test yourself, identify what is still fuzzy, and tighten that specific part. This approach also helps you notice patterns across topics, such as how permissions, users, and processes interact in real systems. The exam rewards those connections because they support better reasoning than isolated facts do. Because this episode is labeled as a hands-on lab game plan, we should be clear about what hands-on means in a beginner-friendly way without turning it into a command tutorial. Hands-on practice is not about memorizing the exact keystrokes of a command line interface, CLI, but about building intuition for what actions do and what outcomes look like. The value of practice is that it turns abstract ideas into lived understanding, like seeing how a permission change affects access, or noticing how a service behaves when it is running versus when it is not. You can do this in a safe practice environment where mistakes are allowed and nothing important breaks, which reduces fear and encourages curiosity. The best practice sessions are small and focused, where you pick one concept and explore it until you can predict outcomes before you observe them. When you can predict outcomes, you are no longer guessing, and that is the point where exam questions start to feel straightforward rather than tricky. Practice builds that prediction skill faster than reading alone ever will. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyber.author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. When you practice, you also want to build the habit of verification, because Linux work is full of moments where you think you did something, but the system disagrees. Verification is simply the discipline of checking outcomes rather than assuming success. And it is an exam-relevant mindset because many questions are really about choosing the safest next step. A beginner misunderstanding is believing that confidence equals correctness, when in operations correctness comes from observable results. In study terms, this means that after you attempt a task in your practice environment, you check what changed and why, rather than moving on quickly. This is also where troubleshooting skill begins, because every mismatch between expectation and result is a chance to ask what assumption was wrong. Over time, you learn to treat surprises as information rather than as failure, which makes practice feel less stressful. The exam often tests this mindset indirectly by presenting a symptom and asking for the best next action, and verification thinking helps you choose the answer that reduces risk. To keep practice from turning into random exploration, you need a simple record-keeping approach that supports memory without becoming a writing project. The goal is not to produce a perfect notebook, but to capture the small set of things you tend to forget, confuse, or misapply. For many learners, this includes distinctions that look similar at first, such as different file types, different permission concepts, or different ways of thinking about processes and services. Your notes should be written in your own words, because copying text does not prove understanding, and copied text is harder to recall under pressure. As you review, highlight the misunderstandings you corrected, because those are the highest value items to revisit later. This is also where spaced retrieval becomes easy, because you can revisit your own notes and quiz yourself on the parts you once got wrong. When you build a personal record of corrected misunderstandings, you create a study asset that is tailored to your brain, not to an average student. That personalization is one of the fastest ways to improve confidence late in the journey. As you move deeper into exam prep, you should also pay attention to how questions are written, because learning the content is necessary, but learning the exam's decision style is what turns knowledge into points. Many questions are testing whether you can identify the most likely cause, the safest next action, or the best explanation among several choices that are not absurd. That means you must practice reading carefully, spotting constraints, and resisting the urge to answer based on the first familiar phrase you notice. A common beginner trap is to see a keyword, latch onto it, and ignore the rest of the question, which is exactly how exams create mistakes. Instead, train yourself to restate the scenario in plain language and identify what is being asked, because sometimes the question is about preventing future recurrence rather than fixing the immediate symptom. This reading skill improves with practice exams and review, but only if you treat missed questions as learning opportunities rather than as a score report. The value is in the explanation, the pattern, and the adjustment to your reasoning. Review is where many learners either waste time or gain huge ground, and the difference comes from how you respond to errors. If you miss a question and simply mark the right answer, you have not fixed the mental model that produced the miss, so you are likely to miss again in a new disguise. A better approach is to ask what you believe that led you to the wrong choice, and then replace that belief with something more accurate. Sometimes the error is a missing definition, but often it is a misunderstanding about relationships, like how permissions connect to users or how processes connect to system behavior. When you correct the underlying model, your improvement transfers across many questions, which is a much better return on time. This also keeps studying from feeling like endless repetition, because you can feel your reasoning becoming cleaner and faster. Over time, your missed question list shrinks, but more importantly, your confidence grows because you understand why answers are right, not just which answer is right. As test day approaches, the plan should shift from building new content to consolidating, because late-stage learning is about reducing gaps and increasing speed. Consolidation means you spend more time on retrieval practice, mixed topic review, and reinforcing the concepts you are most likely to forget under stress. It also means you stop chasing obscure details that feel interesting but are unlikely to move your score meaningfully, which requires discipline. A helpful way to choose what to focus on is to track what consistently slows you down, what you repeatedly confuse, and what shows up frequently in practice questions. That focus is not cutting corners. It is aligning effort with probable payoff. Consolidation also includes building a calm confidence that you can reason through unfamiliar variants, because no one remembers everything perfectly. The exam is designed to reward solid fundamentals and sensible decision-making, and consolidation strengthens those fundamentals by making them easier to access quickly. When you feel your recall speed improve, you will also feel your anxiety drop, which is a real performance advantage. Your study plan should also include energy management, because cognitive performance depends on sleep, attention, and stress more than people want to admit. If you study while exhausted, you may put in time but store less learning, which makes the whole process feel discouraging. Instead, aim for consistent, focused sessions and protect recovery, because your brain consolidates memory when you rest. You can also reduce stress by using predictable routines, like starting each session with a short retrieval warm-up and ending with a quick summary in your own words. These routines reduce the mental friction of starting, and they create a sense of completion that motivates you to return tomorrow. Another key point is that you should not measure progress only by how much you covered, because coverage can be fast and shallow. Measure progress by how quickly you can explain a concept, apply it to a scenario, and eliminate wrong answers confidently. When you measure the right thing, your plan becomes self-correcting instead of emotionally driven. On the day you take the exam, the best mindset is to trust your process and focus on clean execution rather than trying to summon last-minute brilliance. Clean execution means reading carefully, identifying what the question is truly asking, and selecting the answer that best fits the scenario constraints rather than the answer that includes the most familiar words. If you get stuck, move forward and return later, because time management matters, and one difficult question should not steal time from several easier ones. It also helps to remember that many questions are designed with tempting distractors that are partially true, so your job is to find the most correct answer for the specific situation described. This is where your practice with verification, troubleshooting thinking, and structured review pays off, because you have trained yourself to reason rather than to react. The exam is not a referendum on your worth. It is a measurement of your readiness in a defined scope. When you approach it with calm, methodical attention, you increase accuracy and reduce unforced errors. By the time you finish this game plan, the big idea to carry forward is that passing Linux Plus is much less about intensity and much more about a reliable loop of learning, practice, feedback, and consolidation. A schedule that fits your real life gives you consistency, and consistency beats occasional marathons because it aligns with how memory strengthens over time. Hands-on practice builds intuition and verification habits, and those habits help you answer scenario questions even when the wording is unfamiliar. Careful review turns mistakes into improved mental models, which transfers across many topics and accelerates progress late in the journey. Consolidation in the final stretch tightens recall speed and reduces anxiety, which improves test day performance without adding extra hours. If you follow a plan like this, you will not just prepare to pass a certification exam. You will build learning habits you can reuse for every technical skill you tackle next.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.